JB, we are here at the Martin Auto Museum in Phoenix, Arizona. You're standing beside what I believe is a pretty expensive car. Why don't you tell me what this is about?
Well, aside from the expense of it, I think the thing that jumps out if you're standing in its presence is this is really a car. Okay, this is not a car so much as it is an automobile, and it tells you what you could do if you didn't have a budget, you didn't care about anything, especially money. You just wanted to build the most beautiful thing you could. These things were handmade. Every single thing you see is made by hand by artisans and craftspeople. The number of things that are on it are just mind-numbing. The dash and the cowl is polished aluminum. The car was largely made out of aluminum for lightweight.
So what's the name and model and year of this car?
This is a Duesenberg Model J.
Okay.
And
1930?
1930. Remember that Duesenberg really just made the chassis and the motors, and they made the running gear, and then it was up to the bodybuilders, the Carrazziolas, who were commissioned to build a body as a particular body style for that particular owner. So an owner could sit down in the studio, an artist would sit there and draw various versions of the front of the car, the middle of the car, the entire car, and then they had an opportunity to influence the way the car was going to be built. And if they wanted longer fenders or lower fenders, they simply asked for it, and they did a drawing. The customer approved it, and that went to the bodybuilder, and he built it exactly as was drawn.
Wow.
So that's why these cars are not models, because each one can be completely different and totally distinctly different.
Right.
Than the next one. There's no commonality other than the engines and chassis.
Right. So we see this is called the boat tail.
Right, and it's for obvious reasons. The back of it resembles a boat, and this particular one is in hand-formed metal and then polished. Then you have a rumble seat that's built into this, and the fit and finish on it is just exquisite. I mean, you can look at this car for hours and hours and just can't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah, you just look around. I mean, everywhere you look, I mean, we were talking about how we have these laced leather covers over the
just to protect the frames, the springs.
Yeah, that's wild.
So if you can imagine a flat piece of metal and you had to make a fender out of it, that's what they were faced with.
Wow.
You can't even imagine the time, the expense, and the artisanship that was required to do something on a compound curve and build this thing from absolutely nothing. Same thing of the entire car. If you notice, there's no flat spots on this car anywhere. It's all compound curves going this way and that way. Incredibly difficult to execute as a metalsmith. You had to have the finest people in the world, really, to be able to build a body like this. And then, of course, remember that the Duesenbergs were not only famous for their body styles and their uniqueness, but also that these were the fastest cars in the world.
Right.
They were really very much interested more in racing and land speed records and that sort of thing than most everyone else. And so that's why they built these cars really as a vehicle to pay for their racing habit.
All right, well, let's go around the side. The engine's open.
Yeah.
The cover's open on this side here.
If you notice the running lights or the highway lights actually turn with the steering wheel. So if you turn the steering wheel, these lights actually turn to see where you're going to be going. Right. Got these beautifully made shock absorbers. If you notice, there is a leather strap coming out of the bottom of it to soften the blow and make it quiet, so there was no chattering. So that actually controlled the suspension in the front, made it more pliable. And you come around here to some of the amazing. I mean, there's no way you can simplify one of these cars in a few minutes. It's just mind-numbing amount of detail here. But if you notice, this has a supercharger, which is very, very early. Superchargers weren't even in common use until about this period, and usually on commercial applications, not on passenger cars. So this is a real early version, and this car was making 300 horsepower when that was unheard of.
Absolutely.
And so you see some of the beautiful detail. The exhausts are obviously very high flow. They're 4 inches in diameter.
Right.
So this, and look at the length of this engine. I mean, this looks like something out of an aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sure the influences of the aircraft are everywhere.
An
Stromberg,
overhead cam, maybe? It looks like a
yeah,
two.
two overhead cams. Stromberg carburetor company was around many years, and they obviously made some special carburetors. If you notice, it's got two carburetors
Right.
that feed into the supercharger, so that you can create a lot more pressure, pushing the gas fuel mixture into the engine and creating all this horsepower. This is 300 horsepower.
Back in the day when 100 horsepower was an
100
awful
horsepower
lot.
was something you dreamed about.
Yeah, right.
And because this car is so big, it needs it. This car would go over 100 miles an hour,
That's
which was
amazing.
also unheard of in a car this size.
Because you can just the feeling of
Oh yeah,
of weight to it. Like this
right.
is such
And
a
you had to
substantial
steer it.
car.
These enormous wheels going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah. Wow.
Had to be quite an experience.
Wow, what a car.
Yeah, it really is. This is a magnificent machine.
Let's just have a peek inside real quick. Let's see the interior.
Right.
What comes out to you?
Well, look at the machine turn dash. That was later brought out in some of the Buicks and Cadillacs of the later era. This car has a lot of things on it that were later picked up by other cars and used because these guys had enough resources to do whatever they wanted, so they could be ahead of the curve and spend whatever time and money that they needed to come up with advanced concepts and bring them into fruition. So the drivetrains is all being Duesenberg issue and the motors, that was one thing, but the bodies themselves, of course, created another opportunity for creativity, and you can see the incredible craftsmanship. This stuff is so well executed that you can't even see the welds. They don't need to be covered up with primer and paint. Wow,
and one thing that comes out at me is they have two electric motors for the two wipers.
Right, exactly.
I'm seeing an awful lot of gauges.
Yep. You had to keep track of what's going on in the engine room. And if you notice the RPMs on this are quite high, and then look at the speedometer. Remember, this is a car built in the late 20s that has 150 mile an hour speedometer. Okay.
Wow.
And these cars, in certain cases, the engines and chassis were built into cars that were actually going. I think that at one point they actually went over 200 miles an hour.
Wow. Well, JB, thank you for giving us a little tour of this thing.
Yeah, this is one of Mel Martin's favorite cars, if not his favorite, and we're really fortunate to be able to.
Yeah, we appreciate them
spend some time with it. It's hard to get this close to Duesenberg.
Yeah, to have access to it like this is
really
it's a real.
Thanks to him and thanks to
a real honor.
Faber for giving us that opportunity.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Onward to other
and upward.
Extravaganza.